The security patch was scheduled for 6 o'clock in the evening, exactly 30 minutes after I would be gone for the day. I knew it could go wrong. Server updates always carried risk, especially with our Frankenstein infrastructure of bolted-together systems at Apex Treasury Solutions. In the old days, I would have stayed late, monitored everything, and been ready to jump in if the integrations hiccuped. But that was before my director told me to stick to my basic hours. So, at 5:30 in the afternoon on that fateful Thursday, I saved my work, closed my laptop, and walked out of the building. I got to my car at 5:38, engine running, music playing on the radio, and pulled out of the parking garage right on schedule. Somewhere behind me in server rooms I could not see, a countdown was ticking. $50 million in transactions were about to hit a system that was about to break. There were banking clearance protocols that would freeze and automated reconciliations that would stick mid-cycle. This was the kind of catastrophic failure that makes senior executives sweat through their tailored suits and starts countdown clocks on careers. And I was simply heading home to make chocolate chip cookies with my daughter. My phone started buzzing before I hit the first traffic light. Then it did not stop. The evening commute was always a test of patience, but today I felt a sense of strange relief. The sun was setting over the Piedmont region, casting long orange rays across the highway. I did not look at the notifications flashing on my phone. Let me back up. My name is Adrian Barlow, and until about 3 weeks before that Thursday, I was the Senior Systems Integration Lead at Apex Treasury Solutions, a mid-sized financial technology company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am 54 years old, an age where you start to value peace of mind over corporate promises. My job title sounds fancy, but here is what it actually meant. I was the single person who made sure all our different software platforms talked to each other without starting a digital war. I managed payments, databases, and clearing houses, acting as the firefighter. For 6 years, I worked my way up, learning the legacy systems inside and out. The company had grown too fast, bolting old code onto new platforms like Frankenstein's monster, held together with custom integration code and hope. I did not mind the workload at first. In fact, I loved it. Problem solving was my passion. That rush when you find the bug at 9 o'clock at night that has been haunting the team all day. That moment when systems synchronize perfectly after you have spent hours rewriting an integration script. That was my jazz. But there was a steep personal cost. I worked 60-hour weeks taking calls during my daughter Lily's soccer games and logging in on weekends. Elena called my laptop my other spouse, and my son Oliver asked if I lived at the office. That hurt. Still, I told myself my dedication mattered. The company needed me. My director, Gavin Croft, always said so. He would tell me that he did not know what they would do without me, right before assigning me another urgent project. He told me I was irreplaceable. 3 weeks before the crash, I stayed until 11 o'clock at night, fixing a transaction pipeline error. A developer had pushed an untested update, causing thousands of database errors. I fixed it, documented the issue, and sent a report to Gavin Croft. I got home after midnight, missing dinner and bedtime stories again. Elena was asleep on the couch waiting up for me again. Oliver and Lily were long in bed. I had missed dinner again. I had missed helping with homework, and I had missed bedtime stories. The next morning, I dragged myself into the office at 8:30, running on 4 hours of sleep and cold brew coffee. Gavin Croft called me into his office at 10 o'clock. His office had large windows overlooking the city skyline. Gavin was behind his desk, looking fresh and rested, scrolling through something on his monitor. He told me to close the door, and my stomach tightened. His tone felt off. He thanked me for handling the situation the night before, calling it a crisis averted as usual. I told him it was no problem, but that we really needed to implement mandatory testing protocols before any updates went live, because this was the third time this quarter a failure had occurred. Gavin waved his hand dismissively and said he would bring it up. But that was not why he wanted to talk to me. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. He said he had been reviewing department analytics, time tracking, and productivity metrics. He said I had been logging a lot of overtime hours, 60-plus hour weeks for months. I explained that the workload had been intense since we acquired the new assets, and integrating their infrastructure required extensive manual data mapping. Gavin then put on his corporate concern face, practiced and insincere, and said upper management was worried about burnout, work-life balance, and wellness. And frankly, my overtime was making the department budget look bad. Finance had been asking questions about why one specialist needs so many extra hours, and it was creating optics issues. Gavin ordered me to stick to my basic 40 hours and let unfinished tasks wait. This was effective immediately, with no more overtime, without pre-approval. We had to break the pattern. I sat at my desk for 20 minutes, staring at my computer screen without actually seeing it. Stick to basic hours, no overtime. Work smarter. It was easy for Gavin to say when he was not the one keeping the entire digital infrastructure from collapsing. When I got home that evening, at a reasonable hour for once, Elena could tell something was wrong. We had been together since college, married for 11 years, and she could read my moods like weather patterns. While we cleaned up after dinner, with Oliver and Lily arguing upstairs about whose turn it was to pick the weekend movie, I told her everything. I told her about the late night, the fix, and Gavin's new directive. Elena dried a plate slowly, thinking it over, and then suggested that maybe it was time to give them exactly what they had requested. She said that if they wanted 40 hours, I should give them 40 hours, and not a single minute more. She wanted to see how their systems would hold up when I was not there to catch every falling knife. It felt dangerous and reckless, but it also felt entirely right. That night, I made a firm decision. If Gavin wanted me to stick to basic hours, I would stick to them religiously, 8:30 to 5:30, with a lunch break. 40 hours, not a second more. Whatever happened outside those hours was no longer my responsibility. If the building caught fire after 5:30, someone else would have to grab the extinguisher. The first week of this experiment was harder than I expected. It was not the work itself, but the guilt. Years of corporate conditioning made me want to check my email at night, to log into Slack when a notification popped up at 7 in the evening, or to answer my phone when it rang on a Saturday morning. But I resisted. Elena became my unofficial accountability partner. When my laptop tempted me after dinner, she would gently remind me that we were committed to basic hours only. When my phone buzzed with a work notification on a Sunday afternoon, she would tell me it was not my problem. The cracks in the company's operations started showing by week 2. They were small things at first. An integration script that needed updating did not get updated because the request was sent at 6 in the evening. A major database index in our payment routing table became corrupted at 9 in the evening, halting automated banking transfers. In the past, I would have immediately logged in from my home office, executed a script to rebuild the index, and resolved the issue within 10 minutes. Instead, the system remained locked, causing a massive backlog that delayed transactions for 5 national retail banks until I arrived at 8:30 the next morning. Gavin noticed. Of course he noticed. During our weekly check-in, he mentioned that there had been some complaints about slower response times and small issues becoming bigger ones. I replied calmly that I was handling everything during my scheduled working hours, just as he had specified. He frowned, suggesting that maybe I could be more efficient or streamline my processes. I told him that I had already streamlined everything that could be streamlined, and that the work simply took the time it took. He was visibly annoyed, but did not push further at that moment. By week 3, the cracks were becoming massive gaps. An overnight batch transaction process failed at 2 in the morning, which was a common issue that I had always caught and restarted remotely before anyone else noticed. This time, it stayed failed until I arrived at 8:30 the next morning. That 6-hour delay cascaded into our morning reconciliation processes, pushing everything back and delaying financial clearance for several corporate accounts. The IT director, Harvey Finch, cornered me in the break room later that day. He looked stressed, his collar unbuttoned, holding a cup of strong coffee. He asked what was going on with me, noting that I used to be on top of every system hiccup. I took a sip of my water and explained that I was simply working my scheduled hours, 40 per week, as Gavin had directed. Harvey's expression shifted from frustration to immediate understanding. He realized Gavin had given me the overtime speech. Harvey leaned against the break room wall, crossing his arms, looking exhausted. He told me that 3 different vice presidents had called his team asking why reconciliation was delayed. I told him he should direct those questions to Gavin Croft. Harvey wished me luck and walked away, looking even more worried about the upcoming system maintenance. The truth was, I was not trying to cause problems. I was just doing exactly what I had been told. I was sticking to my basic hours, working normally within reasonable boundaries that any professional would consider standard. It was not my fault that Apex Treasury Solutions had built its entire daily financial operations around my willingness to be available 24 hours a day. If they wanted to run a multi-million-dollar financial service on the goodwill of unpaid overtime, they had to accept the consequences when that goodwill was withdrawn. I was done donating my life to their bottom line, and the system was beginning to reflect the reality of that choice. The following Thursday started normally enough. I had meetings in the morning, worked on updating documentation for our new client database onboarding, and helped troubleshoot a minor system connection issue around lunchtime. It was all routine work. Around 3 in the afternoon, I received a Slack message from Harvey Finch. He gave me a heads up that they were pushing a critical security patch to the main transaction servers that evening around 6 o'clock. He said it should be quick, just a reboot and a software update. In the old days, I would have stayed late to monitor that patch. Server updates, even routine ones, always carried a risk of breaking custom integration scripts. I would have wanted to be there to make sure all the database connections came back clean, that the transactions resumed flowing, and that nothing got stuck. But 6 o'clock was 30 minutes after my basic hours ended. I messaged him back, thanking him for the notice. Harvey asked if I would be around if anything unexpected happened. I wrote back that I would be in the office until 5:30, but after that, I would be off the clock. Harvey replied that if the clearinghouse connection fails, the whole overnight settlement fails, and we cannot run that risk without a systems engineer on standby. I told him I agreed it was risky, but Gavin made it clear that my presence was a budget problem. I could not work without approval, and he refused to grant it. There was a long pause before he replied with a brief message saying he understood. At exactly 5:30 in the afternoon, I saved my current file, closed my laptop, and packed my leather bag. A few developers were still at their desks, but the office was mostly emptying. I walked past Gavin Croft's corner office. He was on a phone call laughing at something, looking completely relaxed and unbothered. I walked down to the parking garage, got to my car at 5:38, started the engine, and pulled out into the Charlotte traffic. The security patch was scheduled for 6 o'clock. I would be almost home by the time they pushed it. My personal phone started ringing at 5:51. Harvey's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring and sent it to voicemail. It rang again at 5:54, this time from an internal IT support number I did not recognize. I declined the call. The third call came at 5:55 from Gavin Croft. I swiped red, silenced the phone, and turned up the radio. I was heading home, and my workday was officially over. By the time I pulled into my driveway at 6:14, I had 12 missed calls and a screen full of Slack alerts. My daughter Lily ran out to the driveway to meet me, her school backpack bouncing as she ran. She asked if we could make those chocolate chip cookies tonight. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and told her absolutely. I told her to go wash her hands and we would start as soon as I changed out of my work clothes. In the kitchen, Oliver was sitting at the dining table, working on his science homework with the focused frown he had inherited from me. Elena was prepping vegetables for dinner, and the house smelled of garlic, olive oil, and home. It was peaceful, warm, and real. This was exactly what I had been missing. During all those late nights at the office, trading these irreplaceable family moments for corporate updates. My phone kept vibrating on the kitchen counter, its screen lighting up every few minutes. Elena glanced at it and asked if it was work. I told her yes. She asked if I was going to answer it, and I told her no. She grinned, kissed my cheek, and said she was glad I was home. I went upstairs, changed into comfortable jeans and a t-shirt, left my phone on silent in the bedroom, and went downstairs to make cookies. Lily had already set out the mixing bowls and was reading the recipe card with intense concentration. Oliver finished his homework and came over to help, arguing that if we were going to make cookies, We should make a double batch so he could take some to school. The kitchen quickly became messy with flour, sugar, and laughter. Lily insisted on mixing the dough by hand, and her arms got tired, so I took over, letting her pour in the chocolate chips. Oliver tried to steal chocolate chips directly from the bag when he thought I was looking, and I had to playfully swat his hand away. We laughed, talked about Lily's school project, and watched the cookies bake through the oven glass. The sweet, buttery aroma of baking dough filled the house, a perfect contrast to the sterile, cold air of the server rooms I had left behind. We placed the hot cookies on a wire rack, watching the chocolate chips melt into the warm dough. This was where I belonged. At 7:30 in the evening, after the first batch of warm cookies came out of the oven, I finally went upstairs to check my phone. I had 43 missed calls, 67 unread Slack messages, and a dozen urgent emails. The latest text message was from Gavin Croft, sent just 4 minutes ago. It read, "Adrian, call me immediately. This is a critical emergency." I read the message, set the phone back on my nightstand face down, and walked back downstairs to have dinner with my family. We had a wonderful dinner of pasta with vegetables and salad, followed by warm chocolate chip cookies for dessert. We watched an animated movie together as a family, and though Oliver pretended he was too mature for it, he ended up laughing at all the jokes. My phone vibrated occasionally in the other room, but I ignored it completely. At 10 o'clock, after the kids were safely in bed, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of herbal tea and finally read through the messages to understand what had happened. I looked at the messages again, feeling the weight of the company's reliance on my unpaid availability. For 6 years, I had been the silent gear in their machine, the one who turned at midnight so the executives could sleep soundly. But they had forgotten that gears need oil, and that labor has a cost. The security patch that Harvey's team deployed at 6 o'clock had not gone smoothly at all. The servers had rebooted successfully, but the new security protocol conflicted with one of my custom integration scripts. This script managed the real-time data synchronization between our primary transaction processing system and the National Banking Clearinghouse network. Without this synchronization, transaction data could not be validated or cleared. Instead of flowing smoothly, transactions began piling up in a massive digital traffic jam. The system did not crash entirely, but it froze mid-process, caught in an infinite loop it could not resolve. By midnight, the clearinghouse had recorded over 10,000 failed handshakes, and the automated reconciliation system began throwing fatal integrity errors. The backup systems, which were never properly configured for our high transaction volume, were overwhelmed within minutes, causing memory exhaustion on the primary routing servers. By 6:30, the IT team realized something was wrong. By 7 o'clock, they understood the database was completely locked. By 7:30, the entire department was in full panic mode. $50 million in customer transactions were stuck in digital limbo. Clients were unable to process payments, and major banks were sending automated alerts warning of missed clearance windows. If they did not resolve the freeze before the overnight settlement cycle completed, the company would face massive financial penalties, regulatory compliance investigations, and broken contracts with major financial institutions. And nobody at Apex Treasury Solutions knew how to fix it except me. I scrolled through the desperate messages. Harvey had sent a text at 6:47. "Adrian, we have a critical situation with the clearinghouse integration. We need you as soon as possible." An IT lead had messaged at 7 o'clock, asking if anyone had my personal cell phone number. Gavin Croft had messaged at 7:15, asking where I was and demanding someone get me on the line. At 7:33, Harvey had messaged that they tried to roll back the security patch, but the rollback did not resolve the integration freeze, and they needed me to look at my custom scripts. Gavin had texted at 7:51, calling my absence unacceptable. Even Clara Montgomery from Human Resources had sent a message at 8 o'clock, asking me to call the office immediately to help resolve an urgent operational matter, hinting that my career could be impacted if I did not cooperate. There were also several voicemails. I played them on speaker while Elena washed the dessert plates. The first was from Harvey, sounding stressed but professional, asking for a call back. The next was from Gavin, his voice tight and strained, demanding that I call him immediately because my expertise was required. The last voicemail was also from Gavin, but all corporate professionalism had vanished. He was shouting into the phone, asking where the hell I was, stating they had $50 million in stuck transactions and that my refusal to answer was a fireable offense. Elena stopped washing the dishes and looked at me. She remarked that Gavin sounded very pleasant. I told her he was clearly having a very bad night. She asked what I was going to do. I told her I was going to go to bed, get a good night of sleep, and then go to work at my regular time tomorrow morning to address whatever need to be addressed. Elena came over, kissed my forehead, and said she was proud of me for setting boundaries and choosing my family over a company that had taken me for granted for 6 years. I slept incredibly well that night. The next morning, I woke up at my normal time, enjoyed a cup of coffee with Elena, helped Lily locate her missing library book, and reminded Oliver to study for his science quiz. I left the house at 8 o'clock and arrived at the office at 8:27. The building was still standing, and there were no emergency vehicles in the parking lot. I badged in, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and noticed the office was strangely quiet. People stared at me as I walked past their cubicles, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity, worry, and anticipation. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into my account. Before I could even open my email, Gavin Croft appeared at my desk. He looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie was loosened, his hair was disheveled, and he had dark circles under bloodshot, exhausted eyes. He had clearly been at the office all night. He looked at me and said simply, "My office now." I followed Gavin into his office, and he shut the door behind us with a loud slam. He turned to face me, his face red with anger. He demanded to know where I had been last night. I replied calmly that I was at home. Gavin shouted that they had a catastrophic system failure with $50 million in transactions frozen. He said every single engineer in the IT department had been here until 3 in the morning trying to resolve the crisis while I was resting at home. I looked at him and said that I was off the clock, reminding him that he had explicitly instructed me to stick to my basic hours and that no overtime would be approved. Gavin's face flushed even darker. He argued that this was a critical corporate emergency and that they had called and messaged me repeatedly. I told him that I saw the messages this morning, but since they occurred outside my scheduled hours, I was under no obligation to answer my personal phone. He yelled that they had nearly lost 3 major clients and that the chief financial officer was furious. I asked if they had managed to resolve the freeze. Gavin muttered that Harvey and his team had barely managed to implement a manual workaround after working all night, but it was a total nightmare that should have taken me only 20 minutes to fix. I agreed that it probably would have taken me 20 minutes, but I was not here because I was following his directive to stick to my 40-hour limit. I pulled 3 documents from my folder and placed them on his desk. The first was a printout of the employee handbook. I pointed out that under Apex Treasury Solutions' official policy, salaried employees were not required to perform after-hours work unless explicitly stated in their contracts. I explained that, under Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 207 of the Fair Labor Standards Act, expecting employees to perform regular, uncompensated after-hours. Labor was an illegal practice, and the company had no right to penalize me for refusing to work unpaid hours. I then pointed to the second document, which was the technical specifications of the integration scripts. I explained that because the company had refused to compensate my overtime or hire support, I had written these custom data synchronization scripts on my own personal time at home to automate the processes. Because these scripts were created outside of my employment hours and without compensation, under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, I retained the personal copyright to this custom software. The company had no automatic license to run my proprietary code during an after-hours reboot without my explicit written consent. The unauthorized execution of my custom scripts during their patch deployment was a clear copyright violation. Finally, I showed him the third document. It was a collection of 3 separate technical risk reports I had submitted to Gavin over the past 4 months. warning him that the bolted-together infrastructure would fail during a security patch if we did not establish proper integration testing and support. Gavin had ignored all 3 reports to keep his department budget looking low. I told him that by ignoring these documented warnings and forcing the senior integration specialist off call without a backup plan, he had committed a gross breach of fiduciary duty to the company and its shareholders, exposing the firm to $50 million in financial liability. Gavin stared at the documents, his face turning from angry red to a pale, defeated gray. He realized I had documented everything, and that his attempt to blame me would instead expose his own negligence. Just then the door opened, and we were joined by Clara Montgomery from Human Resources, and Bradley Henderson, the Vice President of Operations. Gavin tried to start his accusation, but Bradley silenced him. Bradley had already reviewed the incident logs and the risk reports I had uploaded to the compliance database. He looked at Gavin and said that the documentation proved Gavin had ignored critical system risks and violated labor guidelines. Bradley turned to me, apologizing for the situation, and asked how we could resolve this permanently. I slid my written overtime policy proposal across the table. It outlined a formal, compensated on-call rotation, clear boundaries for after-hours emergencies, and the hiring of a junior systems specialist to ensure we had a backup. Bradley reviewed it and agreed immediately. He said the proposal was highly professional and should have been implemented months ago. He announced that effective immediately, the company would implement the proposal, raise my salary by 15%, and promote me to Senior Systems Integration Lead. He also authorized the immediate hiring of a junior specialist, Paige Albright, to train under me, so I would no longer be a single point of failure. Gavin Croft was stripped of his management authority that afternoon and was forced to resign 2 weeks later due to his breach of fiduciary duty. Paige Albright proved to be an excellent addition to the team, eager to learn and highly competent. We documented the entire system integration, built robust testing protocols, and established a balanced work environment. My life returned to a peaceful rhythm. I worked my 40 hours, and at 5:30, I went home to Elena, Lily, and Oliver. I had set a boundary, stood my ground, and proved that my time and my expertise had real value.